Hello and welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Lives with me, Anne Diamond. Today, in an absolutely beautiful English garden, we're going to discover the amazing stories this author tells from her research and love of the Italian Renaissance and its artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo and Raphael, and particularly the hidden stories of how women were forced to lead their lives. Because in Renaissance Florence, for instance, there wasn't just beauty, there was also brutality. This is the latest book from Sarah Dunant. Let's go and meet her. Sarah, it's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to have you here.
And in such a quintessentially British or English setting, although there are lots of touches of Renaissance Italy about it, you know.
Yes, well, I'm a bit of a second-hand girl and I frequent junk shops a lot. And so whenever I find something that reminds me of Italy, I snaffle it up.
She's beautiful. Who is she?
I've no idea, and she's probably not quite technically Renaissance. She's probably 18th century, but I quite like what birds have deposited all over her. I think that gives her a certain je ne sais quoi.
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful. That you mentioned there Renaissance Italy and Florence, places like that. Most people who've never really been or studied, I've always thought, for instance, that what a fantastic thing that such a place could produce so many great artists. And you always just think of it, it must be incredibly enlightened. But whenever you talk about it and when you've been studying it, you found a much darker side. You talk about beauty and brutality coexisting.
Yes.
How does that happen, and why did it happen in Florence, for instance, and when did it happen?
Oh gosh, what a lot of questions there. In terms of the beauty and the brutality, the past is not a pretty place, right? The past is often about disease and war and brutality. And so the Renaissance is no different. And Italy, which is of course not a united country till the middle of the 19th century, is a tiny lot of little different city-states. And for a great deal of the 15th and 16th century, they're fighting with one another. So one or other family can be more or less powerful.
So they have their own governments and their own laws and their own ways of living, and it's usually one dynastic family telling everybody else what to do.
You know, I sometimes think that it's not a surprise that the mafia comes out of Italy, because the mafia is about the power of family. And that comes right out of the Italian Renaissance. Venice is a group of families. It's a sort of oligarchy, and they've been in power for centuries. Milan has been changing hands between the Visconti and the Sforzas. But lots of other little city-states will also have their own dynastic units that are bullying and clubbing and stabbing their way to power. But once they're there, of course, they're living in a moment when there is a feeling that we should be looking back to the past and looking back to a different, more powerful culture, which was Greece and Rome. And so they all start to compete to be more cultured. So ironically, it's partly that the brutality leads to the beauty. And then the other thing you have is the Catholic Church. You want to do anything in life, you need the Catholic Church. Your mum died, you want to have a mass for your mum, you have to pay the priest. You want to marry your dead brother's wife and you're the king, you need the Pope to annul the marriage. So it controls the whole of life. And that means it is extremely wealthy and extremely corrupt. And yet, from this corruption comes amazing creativity, because it is the Catholic Church and it is the cardinals that are putting money into the great artists of the Renaissance. Maybe in all periods of history where there is this volcanic eruption of energy, you have to have the dark as well as the light.
That seems very sad in a way that is true. I mean, we're very privileged. We can look back now at the art. We don't have to live through the corruption and everything that people had to go through. We're very lucky to be able to look back at it, aren't we?
We are, but quite a lot of the art will reflect some of this destruction, you know. There are enormous, great battle scenes elsewhere in the Renaissance. You look at some of the elements of the scriptures, you look at the sort of central thesis of Christianity, and it's full of martyrdom and pain. It's full of things like the massacre of the innocents. And in some respects, all that art was doing was reflecting something of the brutality of life. But it wouldn't have been any good if it was completely anaesthetized, completely sanitized.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's very cruel. Some of the pictures are very difficult to look at.
Indeed. I mean, how many saints get martyred and beheaded? But I think the other thing that happens during the Renaissance is because very early on, you start to see them mastering the art of perspective. So art suddenly can reproduce what you're seeing around you in 3 dimensions on 2 dimensions as if it feels real. Then, yes, they're still making pictures of the scriptures and religion, but almost miraculously, all of the accoutrements are contemporary Florence or contemporary Venice. I'm thinking of one particular one in the Brancacci Chapel, where St. Peter is walking past a set of beggars on the ground and people who are deformed, and in his shadow they will be healed. But they're actually in a little Florentine street, right?
Yes.
And you will start to see that some of the people are dressed in Florentine clothing. And you will start to be able to recognize, if not your mate who's the merchant who's running that ship going to the Indies, isn't that the philosopher Vicino? Isn't that his self-portrait there? So it's becoming an advertisement for how rich and cultured Florence is, even though the subject matter is all religious.
What was life like then for the ordinary people? I mean, we'll talk about the amazing artists maybe in a minute, but for ordinary people, was their life terrible, or did they get some sense of being in a Renaissance?
Look, I think you could argue that life for almost everybody, most of the time in history, is pretty powerfully bad. I think it's Hobbes who said, brutus, nasty and short is the experience of quite a lot of people. What happens during the Renaissance is, for once, the people who have the money have an attitude that's not necessarily just about them getting richer all the time and taking more from the people who don't have, but it's expressing it through some kind of idea of civic values. And that's what they've got from Greece and Rome, right? So they're reading the letters of Cicero and people, and they're suggesting that to be a good citizen is not just to eat until you throw up, but actually not to do anything in excess. And of course the church is extremely rich, but the idea should be that Christ always thought that we should look after the poor as well as the rich. And to be a good citizen is to beautify the buildings around you and not necessarily have a house that's very rich when somebody next to you doesn't.
Tell me about this life, the Marchesa.
Okay, well, this is an extraordinary...
Isabella d'Este.
Isabella d'Este, right. Now, Isabella comes from one of those many families who once were bully boys and clubbed and stabbed their way to power, but have now got their feet under the table and are showing great art. So she comes from the city of Ferrara. And she is the first daughter of the Duke there. She's born in the late 15th century. It is a time when, although women's position is not great in the world, they are at least getting a great education, because we believe in the humanist education. We believe that children should learn poetry and languages and music to become a cultured human being. So at the age of 6, Isabella, who's very smart, is reciting Cicero's letters in Latin to the ambassador sent from the city of Mantua, who's come to assess whether or not she'd be a good bride.
At 6?
At 6. This is not unusual for the period. You are not going to find women marrying for love. They're going to be marrying to keep those dynastic unions strong and powerful. And he says in one of his letters, I asked her so many questions, and she answered with so marvellous and ready a tongue that I could barely believe that a child of 6 could give such answers. And in that one little snippet, I think you see what an interesting woman. Bit overpowering, possibly.
Yeah, maybe he thought she was a bit too much.
Bit difficult.
Yeah.
She can be very seductive, but she can also be very tough. And the most amazing thing about her is that we know this because we have all of her letters.
Ooh. Have you seen them?
I have not only seen them, I've sat with them and attempted to decipher them, but oh my God. She writes something like, that we have 13,000 letters.
Wow, who's she
Okay.
writing to?
To everybody. She's sending letters to cardinals and popes to keep on the right side of them. Is diplomacy with other families in Italy. She's got a correspondence with Leonardo because he comes
Leonardo
through,
da Vinci?
the
She's
Leonardo
writing
da
to him.
Vinci.
Gosh.
He comes through Mantua fleeing from the siege of Milan, and he does a couple of little sketches of her. Thank you very much for the hospitality, right? And she goes, wait a minute, I want the full portrait. Well, he's off in Florence by then, actually busy painting the Mona Lisa, and she doesn't get it. But if you study the sketches that he does of her, which are in the Louvre, and you watch how her hands are placed, and then you look at where the hands of the Mona Lisa are, you'll see that something is staying in his brain. And actually, if you turn Isabella's profile a little bit more like that, you're seeing the beginning of the Mona Lisa. Now, this may sound fanciful, but of course this is how artists work.
Yes. You start to build up a little mosaic of her, not just what she looks like or what she did, but her personality.
Yes. You don't always like her because women to be powerful are not always liked. As I have her say at a point in the book, because the book is written from her perspective, I do things to get things that I want. Male dealers do this all the time. Nobody has their reputation stained by behaving badly if they're a cardinal or a pope. It is because I am a woman that I get this treatment. And I really think that's true, actually.
And that leads you to look at the role of women in those days.
Yeah.
Now, she might have been one of the luckier ones.
Absolutely.
Who was rich, first daughter, you say, so she
Yeah.
got a decent dowry and was able to marry
Yes.
well, and obviously made the most of her position. But what was it like for other women, and particularly second, third, fourth daughters, or something like that?
The answer is that for the longest time, we didn't really know. I mean, in the year 2000, I had friends in Florence. And by the time my two daughters arrived, I knew everything there was to know about Florence because I'd been studying it at this great moment of the early Renaissance. So I took them out into the main square of Santa Croce and I said, so at this moment, I'm going to take you to art galleries and churches and museums, and you're going to understand what happened here in the 1420s. And my 13-year-old, otherwise known as Attitude on a Stick, turned to me and said, I think you should know, Mum, at this time in my life, I don't do culture, I just do shopping.
That's a wonderful quote.
And the 10-year-old, whose job it was to get up her nose, went, oh, that sounds really interesting, Mum. I'll come with you. And so as I started to walk through the streets, I thought, God, I have a hard sell on my hands here because everything that I'm going to show them has a man's name attached to it, right? Here I am trying to raise good, strong girls. And so I asked myself the most obvious question, where are the women?
Yeah.
Did women have a Renaissance? And that was what sent me back to becoming a historian. Now, this is 2000, the year 2000. Actually, in the 40 years since I left university, of course, a revolution which I have lived through my life called feminism had taken place. And so lots and lots of scholars, particularly women, had been asking the same question.
It's interesting, just geographically. You've got men popping up all over the place, doing great things, saying great things. Where are the women?
Well, literally, where were a great many of the women? They were behind bars. They were in convents. And you've put your finger on it yourself, right? Which is that there is no birth control. It is terribly important that women have children. If you can start to have girls, you have to carry on till you've had the boy, because the boy is vital. To marry off your daughter, you would pay the family to take her. There would be, and in some places in the world there still is, a dowry to get rid of your daughters. Now that's fine, but the economy is doing pretty well. There are more daughters. It is getting expensive. Dowries are going up. So if you have 4 daughters, you might be able to finance 2, but the other 2. Or you have a daughter that gets smallpox, so she's not marriageable, or she's born with a club foot or some kind of disability. Luckily, there is one husband who is allowed to be polygamous, and that's Jesus Christ. And so what happens is they are married to Christ. They're put into convents.
Gosh.
And that's one of the key places that women historians started to go, if you go into a convent, you have a republic of women. It's all ruled by women. There aren't men there with their macho habits. So if you wanted to study manuscripts or maybe illustrate some manuscripts, you could. All of the 7 liturgies that you sing, you will need somebody to do the music for. You will be able to sing publicly in terms of being in a church. We now know that women are writing plays.
Well, in the convents.
In the convents, which novices are performing. We know that if a play is really popular, it was samizdated and sent to another convent. We know that women were composing music in a convent. When I was working on Sacred Hearts, the book about nuns, I came across a group of women singers in Britain who were into early music, who had reconstructed the sound of those convent voices.
Yes, haven't you even found proof that some of the women inside the convents actually transposed Palestrina?
Yes.
For female voices.
Yes, because all of the music...
So they were that clever.
The great music that was coming out was written for male voices.
Yeah.
But they were making it so as women could read it. So the level of creativity inside, and if you were the abbess and you had all those dowries and you were running an economy, you could perhaps also maybe commission a little bit of art for the refectory. And in one particular case, we found out that there was a nun living in the first half of the 16th century in Florence, goes into the convent at the age 8. Her name is Plautilla Nelli. She teaches herself to draw and paint by studying the sketchbooks of a monk who had been a painter. And at a certain point, she paints the only, and it's huge, Last Supper painted by a woman for another 200 years. And it's 3 meters long. It hangs in the refectory of the church. This will be in the mid to late 16th century. And of course, time takes its attrition. The convent closes, it gets rolled up, it gets lost. But through a wonderful philanthropic group run by a woman called Jane Fountain, an American, who starts a society called Advancing Women Artists, they find this and they restore it. It takes years to restore. In Florence, I watched the restorer at work because all of the painters sort of semi-flaked off. And now that painting is in the museum of the great church of Santa Maria Novella. Now, even 15 or 20 years ago, we didn't know that painting existed, right? And so that's what you're looking at in terms of what I really think about feminism sometimes is it's not just changed the present, it's changed the past.
Well, yes.
It's changed
We
history.
wouldn't know about all of this. The fact that you novelise these amazing stories. You went to Cambridge, for heaven's sake. I mean, what do your fellow academics maybe think of you?
I think that most of the academics know when somebody's done the work. The only image I can give you is if you think about the past as a huge canvas done by a pointillist painter. You know those painters who just put tiny little dots, and you only get the shape of it as you stand back. 50, 60 years ago, the painting looked different. It was very, very male. It was also very, very white.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Right? So you just think about that. And then you think about the thousands of little dots that all of those academics and novelists like me have added to the picture. And then when you step back, you have a different scene entirely.
Oh, I like the idea of that. Talking of paintings, again, another little thing about the Marchesa, about Isabella, is that she was vain a bit, I suppose. Was she beautiful? We don't really know, except you have 2 contrasting paintings of her.
Oh, she's so interesting. I think that as she grows older and those deste chins start to appear, she has a brilliant idea, which is she constructs a special headdress. They have a relationship with the Sultan of Turkey, this family, so they've got little miniatures of turbans, and she has the idea for a turban. And because Isabella runs fashion, what Isabella wears one year, everybody's wearing the next. So you look at any painting of a famous woman, say in Venice, through most of the 16th century, they've all got the capigliari on,
Wonderful.
Right? But she uses it for the most beautiful portrait on earth. Just before her death, she commissions Titian, who by now is the greatest portrait painter in Europe, to paint a picture of her. She sends him the most flattering picture ever done of her when she's about 18. We haven't got it anymore. And says, I want this face and I want it dressed in these things. And this is the portrait that she gets.
Oh, she's lovely.
She is so beautiful. Oh. She's 62 when the portrait.
Oh no! Oh no! She's definitely not 62.
Exactly. Isn't she gorgeous?
Yes, she's lovely.
Look at that, and look at the quality of the clothing, and look at that headdress.
But even her face is composed and beautiful, and
yes,
yeah, she's
face
lovely.
is the face of a 17-year-old.
Well, it is.
Or something. Yes.
So how would she have looked, do you think?
Okay, well, we've got one clue, which is apparently Titian did an earlier portrait. Now that's lost too, but it must have stayed around for long enough for Rubens, who comes along some decades later, who's a desperate fan of Titian, and he's in Mantua and he copies it, and that
so we've got
exists.
his copy of the original. Oh yeah.
Now, actually, I have to say,
she's not bad.
I rather
but
prefer her. Look, she's positively bursting out of this
she really is.
Beautiful dress.
That's the sweet tooth.
Yeah, you can see that she's sort of quite fleshy now.
Yeah.
You can see the beautiful headdress, but you can see the same spirit.
Yes.
We think he painted it when she was in her 50s, so he's still being flattering.
Yes, he is.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's
I
what
can
they had to
understand
do.
why she would prefer putting that one out on Instagram, wouldn't she?
Oh, yeah, and that is the painting that goes down into history, right? Not only is she a fashion influencer, she's a sort of photoshopper.
Yes.
She controls
she was ahead of her
the
time.
dissemination of her own
Goodness.
image.
Do you know, you tell that story and you drop in names that are, I mean, they're so big nowadays. You know, you drop in names like Rubens and Titian, and of course this was also at a time of Leonardo. And
Yeah.
I didn't know they all existed at the same time.
There is an amazing period from the end of the 15th into the beginning of the 16th century when a huge number of the real giants are there.
Yeah.
But equally, there's an amazing moment much, much earlier when it all starts, when the likes of Brunelleschi, who's building the dome, and Donatello, who's the great sculptor in town, were there. And I think part of it's what we were discussing at the beginning, which is if there's a demand by a lot of people with money who want to use their money for things of beauty and to show how cultured they are, then you're going to produce a lot of great artists.
But what I can't get over is that Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, just to name three of them, because I know you've written about these guys before, but I didn't know they coexisted and that they knew each other and that they fell in and out of friendship with each other because usually they were competing for some big commission from one of the big governments.
Yes, and what's really interesting is how, for instance, Leonardo and Michelangelo are more or less contemporaneous. Leonardo's a bit older and he will die younger. Michelangelo will continue on and therefore become that famous. But Raphael's a slightly younger generation. And there's a wonderful moment in Florence, 1504, 1505, right? David is just finished. So the great David statue is up there. Leonardo's now back in Florence because he's getting some commission, so he's painting the Mona Lisa. The town hall wants both of these famous sons of the city to decorate the town hall with battle scenes. And Raphael, who's young, has heard this. And so he comes to Florence to study them. And he hasn't yet become a great painter in his own right, but you watch him copying Leonardo's beautiful Madonnas. You watch him copying bits of the cartoons, the drawings that they put on the walls. And then you watch him going off and creating his own style out of it. So it's like a relay race, right? Right from the very beginning of the Renaissance, somebody's running with the baton and they've achieved this much. And as they give their last gasp, they hand it on to somebody else and they take it on. And that is, in a sense, what the Renaissance
That's a Renaissance, isn't it?
Yeah, there it is, the whole journey.
Isn't that wonderful?
Incredible.
Why don't we have that now?
The short answer is because it doesn't seem as if people who earn a great deal of money are as interested in the notion of civic union and a community and art and culture as being something that joins everyone together.
if there was a movement towards spending money on art seriously, the artists would be there, wouldn't they? We have the talent still.
Yes, and I don't think it's just art. It's about saying we're humble enough to know that there were times in the past when whatever our modernity is now, the past has something to teach us. I mean, that's what I find so amazing about the Renaissance. They believed in God. They thought they had the truth. They were pagans in the past. But they also thought, those pagans thought a lot about philosophy. They thought a lot about how to live a good life. Even though they didn't believe in our God, maybe we could read some of the stuff that they wrote and listen to how they lived their life, because we could learn from it. And I think that humbleness is something that, for all of our notion of progress and the future will always be better, sometimes there's things to learn from the past.
I love your garden. This is such an English garden, but there's a bit of Florence about it.
Actually, I could show you the really bit about Florence about it if you come down here.
Yeah.
Right. This is the grotto.
Oh, it's lovely. It's your grotto.
And as you can see, it's Botticelli's Birth of Venus,
yes.
which are found in a reclamation yard.
So you're always on the lookout for something that reminds you. And I love the idea of building the grotto around her. The Birth of Venus was one of your first books that got first Florentine.
The Birth of Venus was the first book I wrote set in Florence.
Yes.
About a young woman who wanted to be a painter. So it was a result of myself asking that question, where were the women and what would it have been like if you had talent?
Oh, that's absolutely lovely. I really love it. So what did you love about Florence?
I loved the feeling that you were in the city where it all started.
Yes.
Where the Renaissance was kind of born. And there's just a couple of buildings that really sum that up. I mean, the obvious one is Brunelleschi's dome, and the obvious ones are some of the great statues of Donatello. But maybe what other people don't know is that both Donatello and Brunelleschi were mates when they were young. And when they failed to get the commission for the baptistry doors, which would look like the failure of their lives, they were both so upset that they went off together to Rome to get over their disappointment and do a sketching trip. And as a result of all of the drawings that they did in Rome, because there were all these ancient statues and Brunelleschi was now studying the architecture, they come back to Florence and Brunelleschi becomes an architect as opposed to a sculptor. And puts up this idea for the dome. And Donatello then starts to kind of fashion figures where you can feel the life inside them in their bodies. So it's that the study leads to that.
That's how history unfolds.
That's how history unfolds.
You just wonder, after everything you said, if women had been as emancipated as men, whether we would be looking back and discussing amazingly famous women who also were able to achieve those sort of things.
It's such an interesting question, Anne, isn't it? Because obviously women were born with talent too. We know that now because it's all around us. And the only women who make their mark, and there are women, have fathers who are painters.
Oh, that's
And so they learn in their father's studio.
Yes.
And for instance, Artemisia Gentileschi, a name that most people know now, right? Because we're now reattributing great art to her. Her father, very early on, he has a son and a daughter. Early on, the father realizes she's got it and he hasn't. And she becomes really probably the first very successful female professional painter. But had she been born in a shopkeeper's shop, could that have happened? Probably not.
Probably not, no. And so we lost generations of maybe very, very amazing female talent. But at least we are trying to put that to rights now.
Well, we've done our best,
Yes,
haven't
I
we?
think we certainly have.